From the latest on Caribbean cruises to kosher safaris, pilgrimages to Jewish Eastern Europe, and award-winning wines and international cuisine in sun-drenched Tel Aviv. Sit back and enjoy the trip with the travel edition of the Jerusalem Post podcast.
Hello.
Hello. How are you feeling?
Getting better all the time. I'm ready to travel. I need to go somewhere. I love talking to people and talking about places all over the world which one day we hope to go to. I'm feeling a bit whatever the opposite of travel sick is. Lack of travel sick.
So maybe you know what you need is actually some health tourism.
That would be good. I could do with a really nice spa or maybe a cruise.
Is cruise health tourism? I guess in many ways it is. It sort of can be convalescent.
It depends if you overdo it on the food and the drink. If you like cruising, our last podcast was all about cruising, so go back one episode and have a listen. The last couple of months we've been interviewing people from lots of exotic places while I've recovered from my travel sickness. All of these places I'd love to go to. Is there a place that you've been, looking back, somewhere a bit further afield, which is a favourite of yours?
Further afield from the point of view of sitting in sort of Europe, even though Israel... Yeah.
And not the States either.
So Japan was an amazing experience, something I did 26 years ago, going to Kyoto, going to Hiroshima and seeing the aftermath of World War II, the tragedies there, was absolutely fascinating. So yeah, Japan definitely high up on the list.
I was lucky. I worked on and off for 3 years in Singapore, and I love that part of the world. I made one trip to Thailand as well, and it was beautiful. I really fell in love with Asia, and one of my aims, hopefully, going forward is to do a bit more travel in Asia, I think.
In that case, this podcast is for you. And of course, although we don't think of it this way, for those people on the west coast of the United States, so if you're listening in California, in Seattle and so on, that part of the world is not as far away as you and I think it is. You know, it's quite accessible. So we're going to be going to two destinations in Asia, Southeast Asia, East Asia, over the next half an hour or so.
The first one of those is Myanmar.
So we'll learn more about Myanmar, about how exotic and traditional it is with our first guest, and then we're heading to somewhere that is almost is a real contrast because it's such a modern place, Taiwan.
Should we do some questions?
Absolutely. Are you going first or second?
I'll go second.
Is that because there's something in here that's unpronounceable?
Well, there's something in both of them probably that's unpronounceable.
Question number 1. Myanmar is bordered by 5 kantayas. India and China are 2. Can you name the other 3?
Question number 2. Tainan means southern city in Taiwanese. Well, it does according to Google anyway. So what does Taipei mean?
The answer's at the end of the pod. You're listening to the Jerusalem Post podcast travel edition. Find us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter at MarkDavidPod or mail us at markdavidpod@gmail.com. Mark.
David.
What's your idea of remote travel? Something that is utterly different from what you're familiar with.
I think remote travel for me is when I go to a gym on a cruise ship. There's a remote chance of it happening. Is that what you meant?
No, but I have to say you are very funny, and I know that's like the ultimate praise compliment I can give, and we didn't plan that ahead of time, so yeah, that was excellent.
If it involves a tent, again, no. Jungles, no. I'm not a complete city boy, but no, I struggle a bit with going out in the bush or wherever it is.
It's funny, when I posed that question, I wasn't thinking of the generic answers that you gave, which are very appropriate. I was thinking more, a specific place rather than a jungle or the forest or a tent. I was thinking Antarctica or whatever. And I think I'd be fascinated to go to some of these places, maybe to Mongolia or Peru.
Dimona.
But I think I would only go to those types of places for a limited period of time. I couldn't see myself spending 4.5 years in Mongolia, for example.
Well, our next guest went to a remote destination for 4.5 years. Her name is Jessica Mudditt. She's the author of a book called Our Home in Myanmar, and we'll let her tell you more about it.
I have a funny story. When I first wanted to go to Myanmar, I went to a travel agency. This was pre-internet. And I said, I wanted to go to Myanmar. And he sort of looked at me and he went into the back room, disappeared for 5 minutes and came back and said, I had to look that up in an atlas. So he didn't know what Myanmar, he was like, you mean Burma? I said, yes. Burma, because still probably it's more people know it as Burma. It was a British colonial country, and that is a corruption of Burma. So Burma is the corruption of Burma, which is the major ethnic group. In 1989, the military government overnight changed the country's name to Myanmar. And a lot of countries still persist in refusing to call the country Myanmar because that would be agreeing to something that, was done in a completely undemocratic way. You'll also see, like Australia, for example, when things were going well in Myanmar politically, our national broadcaster would swap to calling the country Myanmar and then revert to Burma. So actually, people in Myanmar don't really mind what we call the country. They call the country Myanmar. It's very complicated and very interesting, but they always have done because, for example, when Aung San Suu Kyi speaks in Burmese, she calls the country Myanmar. When she speaks in English, she calls the country Burma. But technically, the country is called Myanmar. But you'll even see, so Lonely Planet, I think it's the only country in the world for the Lonely Planet guidebooks, on its spine it has Myanmar brackets Burma. So I like to say Myanmar is such a complicated country. The complications begin with its name.
It's sort of squashed, I guess, between India and China. It's in the Southeast Asian area. I wasn't going to bring up politics at this point, but you've kind of touched on it. And this is a travel podcast, so we don't get into the ins and outs and rights and wrongs and so on. But from the perspective of a listener, is it a safe country to visit?
If you were to visit Yangon, which is the cultural capital, and you took precautions and you would definitely take out travel insurance, you'd probably be okay. But you are actually prohibited from traveling to much of the rest of the country. You could also go to Inle Lake, which is a very beautiful up north in Shan State, very pristine environment. However, tourism has been decimated since COVID and the coup. However, I have friends in Yangon, they're still working there as expats, and tourists are beginning to return, Western tourists. Throughout Myanmar's turbulent times, there have been tourists going to Myanmar. So you would just take precautions in Yangon. I would say you'd probably be okay there.
The book name is a bit of a giveaway, but what's your connection to Myanmar? Why did you end up there?
I was living in Bangladesh, where I was working as a journalist, and there was some good news stories coming out of Myanmar. And it looks like change was on the horizon, and it looked so beautiful in all the photos I'd seen. And I had a friend, the AFP bureau chief in Dhaka, who had worked for an Australian publisher who owned the Myanmar Times. So I emailed him out of the blue and I said, please, can I come across? He said, I'll give you a 1-month trial as a sub-editor at the newspaper. And if you pass that, you can stay. So my cat, my husband, my Bangladeshi husband at the time, we jumped on a plane and arrived in Yangon in 2012. And we ended up staying for 4.5 years. And it was the most remarkable, optimistic, historic period leading up to these general elections of 2015. The pace of change was unbelievable. And it was exciting. Tourism was really taking off then as well. And you could go to parts of the country that had not been seen possibly ever really by Western tourists.
So I've bought 2 tickets to Myanmar. What are the must-do things in the country, the must-do sites?
The first must-do is Shwedagon Pagoda, and that's in Yangon. This is the most beautiful, enormous, glittering golden pagoda, and you can see it because it's on a hill and because it's enormous from most parts of the city. It's an active place of worship, and Buddhists from all over the world go to Shwedagon Pagoda. Not to mention the tens of thousands of monks in Yangon who will go there from dawn to make offerings. Couples will go there and light incense. People go on their birthday, like a lucky day. So it's always amazing and vibrant to go and watch people. It changes colour throughout the day. At sunset, it's crimson. And in the middle of the day, it's bright gold. And at dawn, it's sort of a soft yellowy colour. And it's just very, very beautiful. And then at night, it's lit up. So you might be having a beer at a rooftop bar. One of my favorite, memories of Yangon is just and looking at the Shwedagon Pagoda, and it's quite dazzling. And it just makes you think it's incredible what we're capable of building, 2,000 years ago.
So you've talked about Yangon as being the cultural capital, but there is actually another capital. You're going to pronounce it for me. I think Naypyidaw. Naypyidaw. So what's the difference? Can people visit the actual capital? Is it somewhere that tourists would go?
The question is, would you want to go? The answer is probably mostly no. It's quirky, I'll give it that, but it's soulless. This capital was built in secret, relocated overnight, all the government workers. Suddenly, the nation has a new capital. It was built on top of a swamp. And it's divided into hotel zones, retail zones, residential zones. It's not a case of build it and they'll come, no one came. And even the embassies haven't moved. Some embassies have bought plots of land, but they're still sitting without an embassy on it. I've been to Parliament and it's extraordinary. It's enormous. But people they drive up and they drive back. So they're really only there for the time. But I've worked for the UN and different agencies, and I went and did some training there for the state-run newspapers. There are some people, but it's because it's so massive, it's bigger than New York, it just feels really spread out and really, really quiet. But it's the only place where you have 24-hour electricity and the internet is a good speed. And there's 20-lane highways that you can play baseball on. It's odd and it's perfectly neat, and it's not like the rest of the country. They've built a replica of the Shwedagon Pagoda in Yangon, and there's a zoo where there were penguins that had icy conditions that cost a fortune. But it's just no one really wanted to play ball there.
You've given us a bit of a feel of the modern experience of Myanmar. First world question here. Is a trip to Myanmar like going back in time? Do you feel you're in a bygone era, it's underdeveloped, or is it something we've not experienced before?
Yeah, it is beautiful in that way. It does feel like it's been frozen in time, and it was essentially frozen in time. So 50 years of self-imposed isolation. It has the highest number of colonial buildings in Asia. Not necessarily the best preserved, but in terms of quantity. And it does also add a really sort of romantic look to them because there's moss growing on them and there's pigeons nesting in enormous high archways and things. When I arrived in 2012, there was no mobile phone. There was virtually no internet to speak of. All the cars on the road were extremely old, beautiful vintage cars, kind of like Cuba, I imagine. You could get a pizza at one place. And then over time, SIM cards came down to a couple of dollars from a few $1,000s. Service delivery companies like Grab came. I got a smartphone for the first time. Newspapers were going daily instead of weekly. But you still have the look of everywhere in Myanmar is people wear traditional dress. So men wear lungies, which is like a sarong. Women also wear the female equivalent. Men and women wear tanika on their face, which is a dried bark paste, which is traditionally a cosmetic, but it's also used as a sunscreen. So it's this pale yellow sort of dried clay smeared. It can be very beautiful, but very unusual, very, very unusual. Traveling around Myanmar, you have some amazing experiences. I went to Molamine, which is where George Orwell was posted in the Imperial Police Force. And I got off the bus and a horse and cart took me to my hotel, which was called Cinderella Hotel. And I thought, okay, this is something they do for tourists. But as we're going there, another horse and cart passes us carrying tomatoes and garlic and stuff. And I was like, this is actually a form of transport. And bullock and cart as well. You can get around, that's how people still get around. It is otherworldly in that way. And then, of course, the cultural traditions as well. These are 1,000-year-old traditions that haven't changed. So you hear the chanting in monasteries at night and people walking around with candles and things in processions. It's very special. It's a very, very special place.
Are there specific times that are recommended for the brave visitor who's going to come to have the best experience, both from the perspective of the seeing that life that you're talking about and then also from the weather perspective?
In a sense, you need to choose between the Burmese New Year, which comes in summer. So that's just past, which is called the Water Festival because it's incredibly hot. And so for a week, the streets are closed off and everyone's dunked in water, whether it's just buckets or there's sort of stages set up everywhere. And you go around on your bicycle or on the back of a car or something, and you could not go to work without getting wet if you attempted to go to work. But a lot of organisations they surrender and close for a week because nothing much is going to get done. So that's the water festival called Tinjin. Because it's the end of the year and a new year begins, you give everyone like a month's salary pay. You also settle all your outstanding debts if you can, to kind of cleanse the bank account and the soul and that kind of thing. And it's a family time as well. But it's really hot. So for tourism, the high tourist season is the equivalent of a winter. And things begin to cool down in November and they're heating up again by February. It's diverse in terms of its climate. There's snow in the north, which is amazing. But much of the country is the plains and there's a monsoon season. And the monsoon season begins in May. And it runs for 2 or 3 months and gets progressively heavier. And I would not advise to travel during that time because it's rain like you've never seen before. You could get 14 hours straight with no break.
Just like Manchester.
I was going to say the same thing.
I'm from Manchester and Mark moved to Manchester many years ago.
Final question. How do people find out more details about visiting Myanmar? And more importantly, how do they find out about your book?
I guess I'm a traditionalist. I love guidebooks. So I would be going and getting, the most recent up-to-date guidebook, but that's how I love to see a country, and the equivalent, online. I would also check the government travel advisories, and you want to do that at the time you book and then just before you go, because the situation can change like it can in any country. So you want to check out that travel advice. And then in terms of my book, you can just go online to any online retailer, or jessicamudditt.com I also sell the book from my website, and there's links to reviews and things like that. And that's the same on Amazon and all your big retailers.
You missed the chance to mention the name of your book again.
The name of my book is Our Home in Myanmar, 4 Years in Yangon.
Jessica Mudditt, you have brought to life something that sounds incredible. I shouldn't say incredibly unique, because it's either unique or it's not, but something that just sounds remarkable. It sounds like you had a phenomenal experience for 4.5 years, and I've had a quick dip into the book. It's fascinating. It's well worth a look. And thank you for sharing your experiences with us.
Thanks a lot for having me on your show.
Thank you, Jessica.
Myanmar Fact File. The main airport is Yangon International. Other international airports are at Mandalay and Naypyidaw. However, there are far fewer flights available in 2023, so flying into Yangon will be the most convenient way to arrive. There are no direct flights from Europe and the US to Myanmar. You need to fly via Bangkok or Singapore with Thai Airways, Bangkok Airways, Myanmar International Airlines or Air Asia. Take taxis wherever you need to go. There's no meter, so agree the price before you set off. You can also take a rickshaw for short distances. It takes around 45 minutes to travel from Yangon Airport to the downtown area. The public transport system is avoided by locals unless there's no alternative, as it's overcrowded and unreliable. There are no 5-star hotels in Myanmar. In Yangon, you can stay at the Park Royal, Inya Lake Hotel and Pan Pacific Yangon. Myanmar's currency is the kyat, and US dollars are also accepted for higher value purchases from around $20. US notes must be in perfect condition and can't be marked or folded, so keep them flat. $1 equals 2100 kyat as of May 2023. Myanmar has a tropical monsoon climate with 3 seasons. The hot, dry intermonsoonal lasts from mid-February to mid-May. It's followed by a rainy southwest monsoon from mid-May to late October, and then comes a cooler, relatively dry northeast monsoon from late October to mid-February. Burmese cuisine is unique. Its traditional Burmese curries are rich and rather oily, and feature prawns, fish, chicken and pork. Burmese salads, soups and curries are eaten with white rice. Noodles are also popular, whether dried and crispy, soft and thick, or tossed through salads. A popular dish is fermented tea leaf salad called lafetto, which actually contains caffeine. It includes fermented tea leaves, peanuts, crispy noodles and tomato, among other things. Mohingyia is a fish broth typically eaten for breakfast and is served with noodles and boiled eggs. Myanmar's ethnic minority groups also have distinct cuisines, such as Shan tomato salad, which is available at most Burmese tea houses. Try a chain called Lucky 7 Tea Houses or Rangoon Tea House in Yangon.
Now the latest news from the Jerusalem Post podcast travel edition. It's Pride Week in Tel Aviv. The city is hosting hundreds of thousands of visitors who flock to the Mediterranean coast for days of parties, concerts and the Showpiece Pride Parade. The main concert is headlined by Adam Lambert, who fronts legendary rock band Queen.
Meanwhile, if you're looking for a great concert on the road in North America this year, acclaimed rock and roll band Aerosmith announced details of their farewell tour some 50 years after their formation. They'll start in Philly on September 2nd and unplug their guitars one last time in Montreal on January 26th.
I'm looking forward to their next farewell tour after 60 years. Big news for Yas Island in Abu Dhabi. After this podcast chose Yas as our first ever overseas destination, SeaWorld have followed suit, opening its first marine life theme park outside the US. You can sample more than 100 animal experiences, 35 rides and performances, and 17 dining options. Yas also hosts Ferrari World, Warner Brothers World, Climb, and the Abu Dhabi Formula One circuit.
There'll soon be more competition on transatlantic routes between London and New York and Los Angeles. New airline Global announced the purchase of the first of 4 A380s. The company plans on flying from spring of 2024.
And for those of you looking to cut waiting times at Ben Gurion Airport departures, you'll be pleased to know there are new self-check-in machines, including luggage tags. You can use them if you are flying with El Al, Turkish, United, Cathay Pacific, Lufthansa, Austrian, Swiss and Air Canada. But remember folks, there's still the security line to overcome. This is Mark Gordon from the Jerusalem Post podcast travel edition. Find us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter at MarkDavidPod or mail us at markdavidpod@gmail.com. About 3 months ago, you and I went on a wander around a travel fair and we were able to sort of travel the world in a day.
Mm-hmm.
One of our stops was in Taiwan,
where we sat with the representative of Taiwan in Israel and had a fascinating conversation, predominantly, as is our wont, about travelling to Taiwan. And when we finished our conversation, we said, now there is somebody that we have to get onto the podcast.
So we asked all the same questions again. It's our pleasure to introduce you to Yaping Lee, also known as Abby.
Arrived Israel about a year ago. I'm thrilled and honored to serve in this ancient country and modern state and promote the bilateral relations of our two countries, which have so much in common. And thank you for having me today in the show.
Excuse my ignorance, and also to help our listeners, is there a difference between Taiwan and Taipei? I always get the two of them confused.
Taiwan is the country name, also known as the Republic of China. Taipei is the capital of Taiwan, located in the northern part of this island country.
Don't think this is the reason that we've asked you here, but I read an article recently, and the article was headlined, "Taiwan is paying tourists to travel there." Is that actually true? And when do I get my money?
Isn't that exciting? Taiwan welcomes international tourists to come, and now we really offer about NT dollars, 5,000 NT dollars, approximately $165 US, This is lucky draw prizes for international travelers who stay in Taiwan from 3 to 90 days. Tourists have to apply to join the lucky draw before entering Taiwan. The lucky draw takes place in the arrival hall of the airport. So as soon as you arrive Taiwan, you can try how your luck is.
And if you don't win, you can fly back? Or...
We still welcome you with our open arms.
So what are the highlights from a tourism perspective of Taiwan? Would you say that it's a place that you go just for a couple of days, city break, or is it a place that you can spend a lot more time?
Taiwan is well known for its safe, convenient public transportation, very developed hospitality industry, savory food, and exciting nightlife, including a lot of bars. So it's surely an ideal destination for city break. However, Taiwan has much more to offer. Taiwan is a beautiful island country filled with a beautiful national park, white sand beaches, and a lot of history and tradition. There's never a dull moment when you visit Taiwan. For the first-time visitors, best things to do in Taiwan includes visit the Buddhist temples, a cultural tour in the National Palace Museum with the largest collection of ancient Chinese artifacts in the world. Check out the view from the iconic building in Taipei 101, which is the tallest building in Taiwan. Eating at a bustling night market, having amazing food with modest prices. Short hike to Elephant Mountain in Taipei City for a picturesque sunset. Launching a lantern sky in Jiufen and visit the waterfall, enjoying the hot spring, and trekking in Tarako Gorge, biking around the romantic Salmon Lake. In general, Taiwan suits every type of travelers. You can go to Taiwan for food, for culture, hospitality, nature, and much more.
You're going to enjoy Taipei 101, David. I know how you love really tall buildings. We were in Dubai and we didn't make it up the Burj Khalifa. In fact, that was both of us. But Taipei 101 is the second tallest building in the world, isn't it?
David is more like a city boy, huh?
Taiwan, I believe, is about the same size as Maryland in the United States. But does size really matter when it comes to tourism?
Taiwan may be small in terms of size, but it doesn't really matter when it comes to tourism. We receive about 12 million tourists around the world before COVID, and our tourism market revived rapidly post-pandemic. Taiwan is dubbed as a hidden gem in Asia, with diverse culture, friendly people, delicious food, and beautiful nature. We are ready to embrace more travelers to experience the vitality and the warmth of Taiwan and the warmth of Taiwanese people.
As you can see, I don't shy away from food. And I do love food from that part of the world. Are there some traditional Taiwanese dishes? Do they vary from what we would see as Chinese dishes that we can get in Israel and in North America? What are the traditional Taiwanese foods?
Taiwan is a paradise for foodies. There are diverse food from traditional to Western, from night market to Michelin star restaurants. The most iconic traditional Taiwanese dishes are beef noodles, steaming buns, dumplings, rice cake, hot pot, scallion pancake, stinky tofu, and bubble tea.
Did you say stinky tofu?
Yes, I really encourage you to try the stinky tofu at the night market. They will be amazing, unique experience. It's a deep fried fermented tofu, and you eat with the tofu with the kimchi. Very delicious.
I just love the marketing there of stinky.
Even though the name of itself doesn't sound very attractive. However, the food itself is very attractive and tasty.
So a lot of our listeners, as you know, are Jewish, either from Israel, from North America, from around the world who are listening to you right now. Is there much of Jewish interest? What about kosher food? What's the experience like for somebody who's traveling and is interested in getting that Jewish experience at the same time?
Just as I mentioned, Taiwanese people are friendly and welcoming. Even though the Jewish community in Taiwan is around 1,000 people, relatively smaller. Taiwan is the least anti-Semitic country. Naturally, Taiwanese hold very positive views of Jewish people. We embrace Jewish culture and tradition with open arms. So far, there are 3 synagogues, Haba House, and Jewish cultural center with nice modern kosher restaurant.
What about yourself? When you go home, what's the first thing that you do to sort of relax after the busy work that you're doing in the Middle East with all that it's, the pressures of here? So when you go home, what's the first fun thing that you do to relax? Maybe tourists would also enjoy.
First thing I would do is to take off my high heels, lie down on sofa with a glass of Kavalan whiskey, which is produced in Taiwan.
Okay, that's a fantastic answer and not one that I was expecting. Good for you. So how do people find out more if they are interested in sampling the whiskey and all the other wonderful things that you've described?
To find out more travel information about Taiwan, you always can visit the official website of Taiwan Tourism Bureau, which is taiwan.net.tw, or the Facebook page of the representative office, my office, which is Taiwan at Israel. And of course, we hope David Mark will have more travel episodes on Taiwan. So the audience will know more about Taiwan. And also hope you can come visit this beautiful island soon.
We were awaiting your invite and we would be more than happy to come and produce a podcast in Taiwan. It would be a pleasure.
Yeah, they will be wonderful.
And you can guarantee that on that podcast, we will be eating stinky tofu.
and with whiskey.
And maybe even climbing Taipei 101.
Representative Abby Lee from the Taipei Economic and Cultural Office in Tel Aviv, thank you very much for being on our podcast.
Thank you so much.
Taiwan Fact File. Currently, there are no direct flights from Israel, but you can connect via Turkish Airlines, Emirates, Cathay Pacific and Korean Air, or with El Al through Bangkok and Tokyo connecting with EVA and China Airlines. There are direct flights from Europe and the USA to Taiwan with Taiwan's national airlines, with China Airlines from London, Frankfurt, Vienna, Amsterdam, San Francisco, Los Angeles and New York, EVA Air from Paris, Seattle and Houston, and Starlux Airlines from Los Angeles. There are a few ways to travel to downtown Taipei from Taoyuan Airport. It takes around 35 minutes from Taoyuan by metro to Taipei Metro Station. There are 2 buses that stop at both Terminals 1 and 2 and take you to the city centre, one to Taipei Main Station and the other to Taipei City Hall Bus Station. A single ticket costs around $4.50. Taxis take 50 minutes and cost around $40. For a luxurious stay, try the Grand Hotel Taipei, a 14-storey palace-like building that faces the Keelung River. Or for a contemporary option, the Eslit Hotel, run by a famous bookstore chain and located in the Cultural and Creative Park in Taipei. $1 will buy you 30 Taiwanese dollars as of May 2023. Taiwan's weather is warm all year round, and the further south you go, the warmer it will be. There is no severe cold in winter. The weather in summer is hot and humid. Light rainfall can occur throughout the year. For food, a must visit is Ding Tai Fung. Founded in Taiwan in 1958, it has grown from a mom-and-pop restaurant into an internationally recognized brand. Bubble tea originated in Taiwan in the early 1980s. It contains milk tea and flavored tapioca balls. Taiwan's street markets offer a wide variety of cheap, delicious food. Look out for the Shilin Night Market in Taipei. There are some 6,000 vegan or vegetarian restaurants across Taiwan, and kosher food is available in the JCC.
I know I say this after most of the podcast, but there's 2 more added to my to-do list of places to go. As I said at the beginning, I do love Asia, and I haven't been to Asia enough. I now have 2 more targets to aim at.
And as I said at the beginning, incredible contrast between those 2 destinations. There is a big distance between them, but from us sitting in sort of our European, North American vantage point, it's kind of we club them kind of together because it's over there somewhere far away, but they are so different. And like you said, both sound absolutely fascinating.
Massive thanks to Jessica for bringing Myanmar to life. Just a really, really interesting story. And a special thank you to Representative Yaping, or Abby, for bringing Taiwan to us.
If you would like to hear about another destination in Asia or somewhere else in the world that we haven't covered or that you'd like us to return to, do let us know either at MarkDavidPod across social media or mail us markdavidpod@gmail.com.
If you enjoyed this episode...
Which you did.
I don't know, there were bits where you were talking. Okay. If you want to listen to any of our 59 previous episodes, please... go back through our library. You can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever podcast provider you use. Give us a 5-star rating and say how much you like the pod, even if you didn't.
And if you would like to hear our next 59 or 60 episodes, then hit the subscribe button and you won't need to go searching. They'll come straight into your podcast box.
Time for the quiz answers?
Sure. Myanmar is bordered by 5 countries. India and China are 2, but can you name the other 3? Mark?
Thailand?
Yes.
That's me done.
No, I want you to pronounce the middle one. Mark's reading the answers.
Okay, are you ready?
Yeah.
Bangladesh.
Well done. And the third one?
Laos.
Now, that's the question. Is it Laos or is it Lao?
I don't know, but you've got an S on the end, so
So we're going to have somebody on the pod, or we're going to have to go to Lao or Laos to figure out how to say the name.
Is it Thailand or Thailand?
Why don't you get on with question number 2, my friend?
Tainan? Tainan means southern city in Taiwanese. So what does Taipei mean? I'll give you a clue. Taipei is towards the north of Taiwan.
At least you know where you are when you're in Taiwan.
As long as you speak Taiwanese.
That's it, folks. Enough of our nonsense. We hope you've enjoyed this pod and that you'll join us again in 2 weeks' time, or if you're from Britain, in a fortnight, for the next edition of the Jerusalem Post Podcast Travel Edition.
It's going to be a good one as well because it involves food.
Folks, take care.
Bye-bye.